there was a British space program, a real British space program in the 1970s or something like that. And they ran a recruitment ad in the London Times, full-page ad that just said astronauts wanted, no experience necessary. I mean, and it never went anywhere. The British, obviously, as we know, the British never went to space, never landed a man on the moon. But I always thought it was like such a fantastic ad and a great spirit of just like, hey, anybody can be an astronaut, you know. And I think it fitted really nicely with when Judy and I first talked about the business, this moment in the entertainment industry where social media stars were exploding and this self-distributed DIY media was happening. And we were like, yeah, it's like that's the spirit of the age. It's like anybody can do it. It's a little punk rock almost, you know. And I think things have shifted a little bit since then, but it was a moment that we wanted to try and capitalize on in the name.
Nick Shore is the Chief Creative Strategist at Astronauts Wanted, the joint venture between Sony Music Entertainment and Judy McGrath, former chairperson and CEO of MTV Networks. Astronauts Wanted serves as a creative incubator for elite social media talent, both in front of and behind the camera. Harvesting content targeted towards today's teen audiences, stories, shows, animations, and branded entertainment meant to spread and thrive across all platforms, both traditional and digital.
It seems to be that there's this kind of swing either way. So on the one hand, there's so much fantastic long-form entertainment. It seems as if you're either in the long-form, premium, amazing pieces of television content, for example, or you're in the atomized content business. And it's sort of like things are very fast and very disposable and very short. And it feels like a lot of stuff in the middle is dying away, and or having to decide which one of those two ways it's going to go.
Well, I had a long, great career that was a fantastic experience, and it got very big. And I began to think I was on a cruise ship surrounded by speedboats. So I thought, you know, in the early days of MTV, there were so many naysayers, so many people who wouldn't believe that it could ever work. There was something sort of counter in my personality that had gotten softened over the years. So I thought, I'm going to try jumping on one of these speedboats and see what I can do. And let's sort of untether from the big machine and get closer to, you know, enabling young people, maybe not on the same scale, but to tell stories and create series and create whatever it was they wanted to do, and try to find the next Matt and Trey, and try to find the next, you know, Hype Williams, because I believe they're out there and they're swimming around in that incredible stew that's pretty much living outside the mainstream media culture.
Astronauts Wanted certainly has their finger on the pulse when it comes to youth culture, knowing the ins and outs of how their audience devours media across devices and platforms is paramount to the success of their creative.
I've always believed in, you know, art and science, and the science of research, which Nick was an expert at, qualitative research, I thought was going to be important in informing us, you know, on how to really develop a meaningful company. And so that's what we're doing.
The original spirit of the organization still lives, which is we're always, you know, we're always targeting youth, and youth is always looking for what's next and what's new and what's coming. And so as creators in that space, you're always like, okay, what is the next thing? Is it a new format? Is it a new talent? Is it a new writer? Is it a new voice, a new face? So really, we're just always looking for that. That's our things, like what's the zeitgeist and how do we find people that can really put that on film.
I think we started off in a time when, you know, awesomeness and Vice and all these incredible new brands were exploding. And we were looking at full screen and Maker. And so we started to think, like, what's the needle we can thread? Where do we fit in this? What are we good at? And rather than try to launch our own major platform, we took a look at what was going on around us, and we thought what we're good at is spotting talent, helping them, enabling them to tell the stories they want to tell. Now we're sort of focused on leveling up a little bit more into scripted.
We're very fascinated with the way that storytelling can happen in transmedia. So here's the main story, and then here's how you tell parts of that story on different platforms like Snapchat and Twitter, etc. And so we partnered with Bernie Sue on a project called Socio. Bernie Sue was a writer coming out of Transmedia space, and we made a show called Socio with him. And now it's sort of like tracking a serial killer using social media forensics. And so you can actually, elements of that story are told in different places in social space.
Bernie Sue is one of many transcending the traditional form of telling stories through moving picture by fracturing the story and dialogues across a number of social media and digital platforms. Nick Shore expands on the concept of transmedia.
It's about saying the story is more of an ecosystem than a line, than just a line. So it's saying like, here's the story, but the story progresses A, B, C, D. But also you can go down rabbit holes and wormholes off the story to the side like this. So if a character on screen in the main story is engaging in a Snapchat dialogue with somebody, you as an audience, you can go watch that Snapchat dialogue somewhere else on Snapchat. So it's like the story can be advanced in a lot of different directions at once while still maintaining the narrative thread. And this generation, you know, because they live on all these platforms simultaneously, it's not unusual for them to operate that way around a story, you know, to be like, okay, let's look at it on these different places.
I sat down with Johnny Blitzstein and Chris Murphy, who head up Branded Entertainment, to discuss how brands are coming to Astronauts Wanted and working with creators to tell stories that young consumers actually want to see.
The reason that influencers have gotten so popular in the past few years is because there's this context collapse happening where when you're on Instagram and you see a picture of your mom and then there's an influencer in the middle and then the picture of your best friend, you start to feel like that influencer is part of your family or that there's someone that you know intimately. And you add to that the fact that they're interacting with their fans and having a two-way conversation. That's really changed the way that the Gen Z audience thinks about this talent. They are friends they just haven't met yet.
One of the things that we were very excited about 3 or 4 years ago, Judy and I, was the rise of the social media star, which has now risen. Obviously, their star's risen. So I think we built a lot of content early on with those guys, people like Grace Helbig and May-Marie Hart, who've gone on to become household names, Lily Singh, Superwoman. And so always like, they're exciting, they're completely new kinds of voices and faces, and they've got these amazing fan bases that you can work with. So, you know, when you're working with content with social media stars, you're kind of working in this reactive system where it's like, they do something, the fan base reacts, and then you can fold that into the content like that. So it's almost like working with pop stars, but they're content stars, really.
I mean, what we're seeing in terms of trends in the marketplace is that people are watching TV less, and it's not just the numbers that are crashing, it's really the audiences are getting spread out across all these different platforms. So you have people watching a little bit on television, people going on Roku, using Apple TV, and then they're going on social media to follow up and watch additional clips. And so what's really important for brands today is to be able to work with a company to understand how to scoop up all of those views and be able to measure that and say, hey, like my audience is here. It's really across all these other platforms. And so Astronauts Wanted is able to make really creative content, tell great stories, work with influencers and great writers and directors to then make content that's going to exist across all those platforms in really unique ways. And I think that's really the future of where this is going.
You know, with brands, a lot of listening can come into play and really form a beautiful partnership early on. So just get into like what keeps you up at night. You know, what about your business do you need to change? What's your biggest challenge? And kind of working through those things and figuring out how we can use you know, our insights and human truths to solve those problems and create amazing stories.
I think what we've seen in the past 10 years is that the audience, especially young people, starting with millennials, and now that's bled into the Gen Z audience, they don't want to hear directly from a brand about a product. People are watching advertising less and less, and if you look at some of these studies, they're showing that people just don't care about that voice that's authoritative telling you what to think. So when you encapsulate it inside of a story, and in the way that Astronauts Wanted is doing by making it part of a natural narrative where a product just blends into the story and you don't feel like it's an ad, that does something that is like a much more interesting like gestalt result of this this product. You're able to not only get your message heard inside of great content, but by having it inside of content that this audience wants to watch, you're able to actually elevate the value of your brand.
You know, the pendulum sort of swung the other way, and what we're doing and what our advice is to create content that's more like TV, where the brands are integrated as part of the creative and they're seamlessly in the scene, because that feels more natural and native. And just because people are moving away from watching live TV or broadcast linear doesn't mean that the appetite isn't there for that kind of content. And I think that, you know, if you can start to think about those traditional methods of advertising in context to digital consumption habits, I think that that's really like a winning formula.